General Vexthrock stepped onto the human orbital station with all the swagger of someone who had conquered 17 star systems before breakfast. His scaled purple hide gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his four eyes swept the docking bay with the kind of casual disdain usually reserved for inspecting particularly disappointing cafeteria food. "So," he announced to nobody in particular, his voice carrying that special blend of authority and condescension that only comes from being born into military royalty. "These are the famous humans I've heard absolutely nothing impressive about." Captain Maria Rodriguez emerged from behind a cargo container, looking about as concerned as someone checking their watch before a dentist appointment. Which is to say, not at all. She was a compact woman, with graying temples and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she had seen enough nonsense in her lifetime to fill several storage units. "General Vexthrock, I presume?" she said, extending her hand in the traditional human greeting that most aliens found either baffling or mildly threatening. "Welcome to Terra Station. I'm Captain Rodriguez, your diplomatic liaison for this... What did your message call it? Oh yes, preliminary conquest assessment." Vexthrock stared at the offered hand like it might explode, then grudgingly extended one of his own appendages. The human's grip was firm enough to make his joints creak slightly, which he pretended not to notice. "Yes, well, this should be refreshingly straightforward," he said, withdrawing his hand and flexing his fingers experimentally. "Your species has no significant military presence beyond this solar system. Your technology appears to be laughably primitive, and frankly, you look like you'd fall over in a stiff breeze." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully, as if he had just shared an interesting recipe rather than threatened her entire species with subjugation. "Interesting assessment. Based on what data, if you don't mind me asking?" "Standard galactic intelligence reports," Vexthrock replied, puffing out his chest in a display that would have been impressive if he weren't standing next to a human who clearly wasn't impressed. "Your species has been classified as Category 2 intelligence, minimal physical capability, standard biological fragility. The Galactic Dominion has conquered 43 species with higher ratings than yours." "43, Rodriguez repeated, nodding slowly. "That's quite a track record. Tell me, General, have any of those 43 species ever invited you to visit their homeworld for a casual inspection?" Vexthrock's head tilted in confusion, a gesture that made him look remarkably like an oversized, confused bird. "Invited? No, of course not. Why would they invite their own conquerors? That would be..." He paused, his expression shifting as the implications began to percolate through his military-trained, but apparently not overly flexible mind. "Wait, are you suggesting that you actually want me to inspect your defenses?" "Oh, I'm not suggesting it," Rodriguez said with the kind of smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and deeply unsettling. "I'm insisting on it. We've prepared a comprehensive tour of a typical human settlement. Nothing classified, nothing hidden. Just ordinary humans going about their ordinary day." The General's four eyes blinked in sequence, like a biological loading screen. "That's highly irregular and suspicious. What are you hiding?" "General," Rodriguez said, clasping her hands behind her back and rocking slightly on her heels. "If we were hiding something, would I really be this eager to show you around?" Vexthrock considered this logic and found it surprisingly sound, which only made him more suspicious. In his experience, when something made perfect sense, it usually meant he was missing something important. Still, his orders were clear: assess the human threat level and report back to the Dominion fleet. "Very well," he said finally. "But I warn you, I've seen through every deception attempt in the known galaxy. Your primitive psychology won't fool a trained military strategist." "I wouldn't dream of trying," Rodriguez replied, her smile widening just enough to show teeth. "Shall we head down to the surface? I think you'll find our children particularly educational." The shuttle ride to Earth's surface was uneventful, unless you counted Vexthrock's increasingly nervous commentary about the excessive turbulence, which Rodriguez had politely explained was just normal atmospheric entry. Apparently, most civilized worlds had much thinner atmospheres that didn't require what he described as a controlled crash landing disguised as transportation. "Your planet's gravity seems unusually strong," he observed as they touched down, his forelegs working overtime to keep him upright as he stepped onto the landing pad. "Are you certain this is normal? Standard Earth gravity. Rodriguez confirmed, walking beside him with the casual ease of someone who had been dealing with this particular gravitational field her entire life. 1.0 G, as we call it. Most of our colony worlds actually feel uncomfortably light to us. Vexithrok filed this information away under concerning details to investigate later and focused on his surroundings. They had landed in what appeared to be a residential area with structures that looked remarkably peaceful. No defensive walls, no guard towers, no obvious military installations. Just rows of modest dwellings with small plots of cultivated land around them. "This is your typical settlement?" he asked, scanning the area with his military-trained eyes. "Where are the fortifications, the defensive perimeters, the strategic weapon emplacements?" "Well," Rodriguez said, gesturing toward a white picket fence that came up to about her waist, "we do have property boundaries." The general stared at the fence, which appeared to be constructed from organic material and painted with what looked like decorative rather than defensive intent. That's not a fortification. That's barely an obstacle. I could step over it without breaking stride." "Most of us can," Rodriguez agreed cheerfully. "Though the Hendersons did install a gate last year, really streamlined the mail delivery process." As they walked down what the humans apparently called a street, Vexthrok became increasingly bewildered by the complete absence of military preparation. There were no armed guards, no surveillance drones, no citizens scurrying for cover at the sight of an obviously alien visitor. Instead, there were just humans, going about their daily activities as if the fate of their planet wasn't currently being decided by a representative of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Excuse me," he said, stopping beside what appeared to be a human tending to some kind of decorative plant life. "Aren't you concerned about the alien invasion currently being planned for your world?" The human looked up from his gardening, squinted at Vexthrok for a moment, then shrugged. "Are you the alien in question? I am General Vexthrok of the Galactic Dominion, conducting a military assessment of your species' conquest viability." "Well, that's nice," the human said, returning to his plants. "Try not to step on the tulips. They're just starting to come up." Vexthrok stared at the human, then at Rodriguez, then back at the human. He's not concerned at all." "Should he be?" Rodriguez asked. "I mean, you're just here to look around, right? No actual invading planned for today." "Well, no, but—" Vexthrok trailed off, realizing he had no good answer for why a preliminary assessment should cause panic. Still, the complete lack of fear was deeply unsettling. In his experience, species facing potential conquest usually responded with either desperate military preparation or abject terror. This casual indifference was entirely outside his operational parameters. "Oh, perfect timing," Rodriguez said, pointing toward an open area between several dwellings. "The neighborhood kids are just getting out of school. You wanted to assess our population's physical capabilities, right? Well, there's a representative sample of our youth." Vexthrok looked toward the area she indicated and saw approximately 15 small humans engaged in what appeared to be some form of recreational activity. They were running, jumping, and making the kind of high-pitched vocalizations that suggested either joy or mortal terror. Given the context, he assumed it was recreational rather than emergency-based. "Your children," he said slowly, "are playing outside, unguarded, during a potential military crisis." "It's Tuesday," Rodriguez said, as if this explained everything. "They always play outside on Tuesday. Weather's nice, and Mrs. Patterson volunteered for playground supervision duty this week." "Playground supervision?" Vexithrok's head swiveled toward an elderly human female sitting on what appeared to be a primitive observation platform. "That single individual is responsible for the safety of 15 juveniles?" "Oh, Mrs. Patterson's very experienced," Rodriguez assured him. "She raised 4 children of her own and has been watching the neighborhood kids for 30 years. Plus, she's got that whistle." The general observed the elderly human, who appeared to be reading some form of printed material while occasionally glancing up at the young humans. She did indeed possess a small metal device suspended from a cord around her neck, though its military applications seemed limited. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, pulling out his portable scanner to begin analyzing the situation. "Where I come from, juveniles are kept in protective enclosures until they reach physical maturity." "How boring," Rodriguez said. Our kids prefer the hands-on approach to development. As if summoned by her words, one of the small humans came running toward them at what Vexrock's scanner indicated was an impossible velocity for such a small creature. The child skidded to a stop directly in front of the general, looked up at him with wide eyes, and announced, "Cool! Are you a lizard person? My brother said lizard people aren't real, but you look super real to me." Vexthrock stared down at the small human, whose enthusiasm seemed entirely undiminished by the fact that she was addressing a member of a species that could theoretically conquer her entire world. Yes. I suppose I am a lizard person." "Awesome," the child declared, then turned and shouted to her companions, "Hey, everybody! Come meet the lizard person! He's really tall!" As 15 small humans began converging on his position with obvious excitement rather than fear, Vexrock began to suspect that this inspection might not proceed according to standard protocol. "All right, kids, give our visitor some space," Rodriguez called out as the small humans formed an enthusiastic semicircle around Vexthrock. "He's here to observe, not to be poked and prodded." "Can we poke him a little?" asked a small human with dirt-stained knees and what appeared to be tree sap in her hair. "Just to see if he's squishy." "Emma, we don't poke guests," said Mrs. Patterson from her observation platform, not looking up from her reading material. "Remember your manners." Vexthrock activated his portable scanner, intending to conduct a basic assessment of juvenile human physiology. What he saw on the display made him check the device twice to ensure it was functioning properly. "Captain Rodriguez," he said slowly, "according to my readings, the atmospheric composition here is 21% oxygen." "That sounds about right," she confirmed. "Why? Oxygen is a highly corrosive gas. Most species require breathing apparatus in concentrations above 8%. These children are not only surviving in this toxic environment, they're engaged in vigorous physical activity." Rodriguez tilted her head thoughtfully. "Huh, I never really thought about oxygen being corrosive. Is that why you keep making that wheezing sound?" Vexthrock realized he had indeed been unconsciously filtering his breathing since arriving on the planet. "This atmosphere would kill most of my soldiers within hours, even with partial protection." "Well, that seems like poor military planning on your part," said Emma, who had apparently been eavesdropping. "Why don't you just hold your breath better?" Before Vexthrock could explain the biological impossibility of simply holding breath better, his scanner began chiming with increasingly urgent alerts. He looked down at the display and felt his confidence take another significant hit. "The gravitational field here," he said, his voice climbing slightly in pitch, "is 2.7 times standard galactic norm." "Actually, it's closer to 2.8, Rodriguez corrected helpfully. "We've been meaning to recalibrate the local measurements." "These children," Vexthrock continued, staring at his scanner as if it had personally betrayed him, "are playing recreational games in nearly triple gravity. Their bone density readings are off the charts. Their muscle mass-to-body weight ratio is physically impossible, according to standard biological models." As if to demonstrate his point, a small human named Jake came running toward them, carrying what appeared to be a spherical recreational object. According to Vexthrock's scanner, the ball weighed approximately 15 standard units, which should have required industrial lifting equipment to move. "Hey, lizard person," Jake called out cheerfully. "Want to play catch?" Before Vexthrock could respond, Jake hurled the sphere directly at him, with what his scanner calculated as enough force to dent military-grade armor plating. The general instinctively activated his personal energy shield, which absorbed the impact with a bright flash and a resonant hum. The children erupted in delighted cheers. "Do that again," shouted Emma. "That was so cool." "How did you make the sparkly light?" asked another child, bouncing excitedly on her toes in a display of enthusiasm that registered on the scanner as sustained vertical displacement exceeding standard jump parameters. Vexthrock said weakly, "was a military-grade defensive barrier designed to stop projectile weapons." "Can I try throwing something heavier?" Jake asked, already looking around for alternative ammunition. "Please don't," Rodriguez said quickly. "We just got the playground equipment prepared from the last time you kids played See How Far We Can Throw Things." Vexthrock's 4 eyes focused on the playground equipment she mentioned, and his scanner automatically began analyzing the structures. What he saw made his breathing apparatus work overtime. The climbing apparatus was constructed at a height that would require safety protocols on most civilized worlds. The swinging devices operated on pendulum principles that generated enough force to launch most species into low orbit, and the sliding mechanism had an incline steep enough to be classified as a controlled fall device. "This," he said, pointing a shaking appendage at the playground, "is not recreational equipment. This is a training facility for developing enhanced gravitational resistance and kinetic impact tolerance." "Well, I suppose you could look at it that way," Rodriguez mused. "Though we just call it keeping the kids active." A small human named Marcus chose that moment to demonstrate the climbing apparatus, scaling the vertical structure with the casual ease of someone who had never encountered the concept of physically impossible. At the top, he hung by one hand, while waving at the visiting alien with the other. Vexthrock's scanner indicated that the child was supporting his entire body weight, plus gravitational amplification, with a single appendage, while maintaining enough muscle control for voluntary motor functions like waving. According to his database, this feat should have required cybernetic enhancement or powered assistance. "How?" he asked faintly. "How is that small human maintaining structural integrity under those stress conditions?" "Marcus has been working on his upper body strength," Mrs. Patterson called out from her observation post. "His mother will be so pleased to hear he's improving." "Working on his? This is improvement?" Vexthrock watched as Marcus released his grip and dropped approximately 4 meters to the ground, landing in a perfect crouch before immediately sprinting toward another piece of equipment. That fall should have caused catastrophic skeletal damage. "Oh, the playground has impact-absorbing surfaces," Rodriguez explained. "We're very safety-conscious when it comes to our children." Vexthrock knelt down and pressed his scanner against the ground surface. The readings showed a thin layer of cushioning material over standard planetary substrate. "This padding," he said slowly, "provides approximately 15% impact reduction." "Right, much safer than the old concrete surfaces we used to have." 15% reduction, Vexthrock repeated, his voice taking on the hollow tone of someone whose worldview was systematically crumbling. "You consider a 15% reduction in impact force to be adequate safety protection for developing juveniles. Well, we also teach them how to fall properly," Rodriguez added. "Rolling, distributing impact, that sort of thing." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma demonstrated this principle by attempting what appeared to be an aerial maneuver from the swinging device. She released her grip at the peak of the swing's arc, performed 2 complete rotations in the air, and landed in what Vexthrock's scanner classified as a controlled combat roll. She immediately popped back to her feet and shouted, "Did you see that? I finally got the double flip." The other children cheered and began attempting similar maneuvers, turning the playground into what resembled an advanced acrobatic training session conducted by individuals who had apparently never heard of the word impossible. Vexthrock sat down heavily on a nearby bench, which creaked ominously under his weight despite being designed to accommodate humans who were apparently much more structurally robust than his intelligence reports had indicated. "Captain Rodriguez," he said quietly, "I'm beginning to suspect that your species may have been somewhat misclassified in our databases." "Misclassified how?" Rodriguez asked, settling onto the bench beside him with the kind of casual grace that his scanner was now registering as controlled muscle coordination under extreme gravitational stress. "Well, for starters," Vexthrock said, watching as 3 small humans began what appeared to be a pursuit-based recreational activity. "Your intelligence reports listed humans as having limited endurance capabilities and standard mammalian cardiovascular systems." "It sounds reasonable," Rodriguez nodded. "What's your concern?" Vexthrock pointed at the children who were now engaged in what they called tag, which involved one individual pursuing the others at maximum velocity until physical contact was achieved, at which point the roles would reverse and the pursuit would continue. "That activity has been ongoing for approximately 7 minutes. My scanner indicates sustained cardiovascular output at levels that should have caused system failure in most species after 90 seconds. 7 minutes? Rodriguez checked her watch. "Oh, they're just getting warmed up. Last Tuesday, the Henderson kids and the Martinez twins played tag for about 3 hours straight." 3 hours, Vexthrock repeated, his voice hollow. of continuous high-intensity pursuit activity. Well, with a few breaks for snacks and water, Rodriguez clarified. We're not monsters. As if to underscore her point, a small human named Tyler sprinted past them at what Vexrock's scanner calculated as 23 kilometers per hour, which he maintained while calling over his shoulder, "Mrs. Patterson, can we have juice boxes after this game? All this running is making me thirsty." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Patterson called back, still reading her book. "There in the cooler by the swings." Vexthrock watched Tyler maintain his impossible pace without any apparent signs of respiratory distress. "His cardiovascular system," he murmured, checking his scanner readings, "is operating at what my database considers peak performance levels, but his breathing pattern suggests this is comfortable for him." "Tyler's pretty athletic," Rodriguez agreed. "He's on the school track team. Runs the 1500 meter pretty competitively for his age group." 1500 meters, Vexthro said faintly, "in high gravity, in toxic atmosphere, as a recreational activity." "Well, it's hardly toxic to us," Rodriguez pointed out reasonably. "Though I suppose if you're not adapted to oxygen-rich environments, it might seem a bit intense." The general's attention was drawn to Emma, who had apparently decided that the standard rules of the pursuit game were insufficiently challenging. She had climbed onto one of the playground structures and was now moving from obstacle to obstacle at considerable height while still participating in the ground-based chase sequence. "That small human," he said, tracking her progress with growing disbelief, "is simultaneously engaging in vertical navigation challenges and sustained cardiopulmonary exercise, while maintaining spatial awareness of multiple moving targets, at an elevation that would cause fatal injury if she miscalculated." "Emma's always been good at multitasking," Rodriguez observed. "Last year she learned to juggle while riding her bicycle. Her parents were so proud." "Juggling while operating a personal transportation device in triple gravity." Vexthrock was beginning to feel like his vocabulary was becoming inadequate for describing the horror he was witnessing. "How has your species survived this long without eliminating yourselves through recreational activities?" "Oh, we're very careful about safety," Rodriguez assured him. "All the kids wear helmets when they ride bikes, and we have strict rules about looking both ways before crossing streets." At that moment, Marcus demonstrated his understanding of safety by launching himself from the top of the slide, executing what appeared to be a controlled aerial maneuver, and landing in a forward roll that transitioned seamlessly into a sprint to join the ongoing tag game. The entire sequence took approximately 4 seconds and would have required months of training for most military personnel in Vexthrock's experience. Vexthrock stammered, pointing at Marcus. "He just performed a tactical insertion maneuver from playground equipment as part of a children's game." "Marcus has been taking gymnastics classes," Rodriguez explained. "His instructor says he has natural talent." "Natural talent for combat acrobatics," Vexthrock translated. "Your species trains your juveniles in advanced military maneuvers and calls it gymnastics." "Well, I wouldn't call it military training," Rodriguez said thoughtfully, "though I suppose some of the skills might transfer. Marcus's older brother is in the Marine Corps, and he did mention that boot camp was easier than he expected." Vexthrock's scanner began emitting a new series of alerts as Jake approached, carrying what appeared to be a substantial piece of geological matter. According to the device's analysis, the rock weighed approximately 47 standard units and possessed enough kinetic potential to serve as improvised artillery. "Hey, lizard person," Jake called out cheerfully. "Want to see how far I can throw this? I've been practicing." "Please don't," Vexthrock said weakly, but Jake had already entered what appeared to be a preparatory stance that his scanner recognized as optimized projectile launch position. The small human drew back his arm, rotated his torso to generate additional momentum, and released the geological projectile with enough force to activate 3 separate collision warnings on Vexthrock's scanner. The rock sailed through the air in a perfect parabolic arc and landed approximately 60 meters away with an impact that registered as a minor seismic event. The other children immediately stopped their current activities and rushed toward Jake with obvious admiration. "That was awesome," Emma shouted. "I bet you can make it to the big oak tree next time." "Think so?" Jake asked, already looking around for another piece of ammunition. "I've been working on my follow-through like Coach Martinez showed us in Physical education," Rodriguez translated for Vexthrock's benefit. We teach all our children basic athletic skills as part of their standard curriculum. You teach projectile warfare to juveniles, Vexthok said numbly. As part of their basic education. Well, we call it throwing and catching, Rodriguez corrected. Though I suppose the principles are similar. Tyler chose that moment to demonstrate the catching portion of this education by positioning himself approximately 30 meters away and calling out, "Throw it here, Jake, I'll catch it." Projectile weighs nearly 50 units, Vexthok protested. The impact force alone would cause severe skeletal damage. Tyler's got good hands, Rodriguez said confidently. He plays catcher on the Little League team. Jake wound up and hurled the rock toward Tyler with the same casual competence he had displayed moments earlier. Tyler tracked the incoming projectile, adjusted his position with fluid precision, and caught the massive stone with a technique that Vexthok's scanner classified as Advanced Kinetic Energy Absorption Methodology. "Nice catch," Jake called out, and Tyler immediately threw the rock back with equal accuracy and force. Vexthok watched this exchange of what amounted to improvised artillery shells being conducted by small humans who were treating it as a casual recreational activity. His breathing apparatus was working overtime. His scanner was displaying more warning signals than he had ever seen simultaneously, and his confidence in the Galactic Dominion's military superiority was developing significant structural crack. "Captain Rodriguez," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly how strong are adult humans if these are your children?" Rodriguez smiled that same unsettling smile she had displayed back on the orbital station. "Well, General, I suppose that depends on your definition of strong. But if you think the kids are impressive, wait until you see what happens when one of them gets hurt." As if Rodriguez had somehow summoned the event through sheer dramatic timing, Emma chose that exact moment to attempt what appeared to be an even more ambitious aerial maneuver from the highest point of the playground structure. She launched herself from a platform that Vexthok's scanner measured at 4.7 meters above ground level, executed what looked like a complex rotational sequence, and then miscalculated her landing trajectory. The impact, when it came, registered on Vexthok's scanner as sufficient force to cause what his database clinically described as catastrophic structural failure in standard humanoid physiology. The sound of Emma hitting the ground was audible from their position on the bench, a solid thump that made the general's breathing apparatus skip several cycles. For approximately 2 seconds, the playground fell silent. Even the other children stopped their various impossible activities to look toward where Emma had landed in what appeared to be a motionless heap near the base of the climbing structure. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Patterson, finally looking up from her reading material. She marked her place with a finger and called out, "Emma, honey, are you all right?" Vexthok stared at the fallen child, his scanner indicating life signs, but registering massive trauma readings. "That small human," he said shakily, "has just sustained impact damage equivalent to being struck by a slow-moving ground transport vehicle. Shouldn't someone be doing something? Calling for medical assistance? Initiating emergency protocols?" "Let's see what she says first," Rodriguez replied calmly, apparently unconcerned by what should have been a fatal incident. Emma pushed herself up on her elbows, shook her head once as if clearing it, and announced to the watching crowd, "I'm okay. But I think I need to work on my landing technique." "That's good thinking, dear," Mrs. Patterson called back, returning to her book. "Maybe try bending your knees more next time." "Will do," Emma replied cheerfully, bouncing back to her feet and brushing dirt off her clothing. That was actually pretty fun, except for the hitting the ground part. Vexthok's scanner was now emitting a continuous stream of confused alerts as it attempted to reconcile what it had recorded with what it was currently observing. "She's standing," he said in disbelief. "She's standing and conversing normally after sustaining trauma that should have required immediate surgical intervention. Kids are resilient," Rodriguez observed. "Emma's always been particularly bouncy." "Bouncy," Vexthok repeated faintly. "You describe survival of potentially fatal impact as bouncy." Emma, apparently unaware that she had just demonstrated superhuman durability, rejoined the other children and immediately began planning her next attempt at the same maneuver. "I think if I twist a little less and keep my arms in tighter, I can stick the landing," she announced. "Maybe try the lower platform first," suggested Tyler, displaying what Vexthok was beginning to recognize as typical human approaches to safety. "You know, work your way up gradually." "Good idea," Emma agreed, and promptly climbed to a platform that was only 3 meters high instead of nearly 5. The lower platform, Vexthrock said weakly, is still high enough to cause severe injury to most known species. Well, most known species probably don't have as much practice falling as human children do, Rodriguez pointed out reasonably. Emma's been climbing things since she could walk. She's gotten pretty good at not getting seriously hurt. Not getting seriously hurt, Vexthek repeated. While engaging in activities that would be classified as extreme hazard scenarios on civilized worlds. His scanner chose that moment to provide additional context by analyzing Emma's recent impact and comparing it to his species' durability parameters. According to the calculations, a member of his own race experiencing similar trauma would have required immediate life support intervention and extended medical reconstruction. Emma was now attempting the same maneuver that had just nearly killed her, with adjustments based on lessons learned from her previous failure. "Captain Rodriguez," he said, his voice taking on a distinctly higher pitch. "What constitutes a serious injury for human children?" "Oh, you know," Rodriguez said thoughtfully. "Broken bones, significant bleeding, concussion symptoms. The usual things that require a trip to the emergency room." "Broken bones," Vexthrock said slowly, "are not automatically fatal for your species?" "Fatal? Oh, goodness, no. Inconvenient, certainly. Kids heal up pretty quickly, though. Emma broke her arm last year falling out of a tree, and she was back to climbing within 6 weeks. She was engaging in the same activity that caused her injury within 6 weeks of recovering from said injury." "Well, we did make her promise to be more careful," Rodriguez added. "And her parents invested in better first aid supplies." Vexthrock's scanner began providing historical data analysis of the impact site, and what it revealed made his breathing apparatus work overtime. "Captain Rodriguez," he said urgently, "my scanner is detecting evidence of multiple previous high-impact events in this immediate area. The ground shows compaction patterns consistent with repeated kinetic trauma." "That makes sense," Rodriguez nodded. "This playground has been here for about 15 years. Lots of kids have learned to navigate the equipment over that time." "Learn to navigate," Vexthrock repeated. "By repeatedly falling from heights that should cause permanent disability." "Trial and error is a very effective teaching method," Rodriguez said, "though we do try to minimize the error part, where possible." Marcus chose that moment to demonstrate human approaches to minimizing error by attempting the same type of aerial maneuver that had just resulted in Emma's spectacular impact. However, instead of launching from the highest platform, he started from a more modest 2-meter elevation. His execution was flawless, landing in a perfect crouch that absorbed the impact with what Vexthrock's scanner classified as advanced biomechanical efficiency. The other children applauded appreciatively. "See," Rodriguez said, "Marcus learned from watching Emma's technique. Very practical educational approach." "Injury-induced approach," Vexthrock said numbly. "You use injury-inducing activities as learning opportunities." "Well, we try to avoid the injury part," Rodriguez clarified. "But yes, controlled risk-taking is considered important for childhood development. Builds confidence, teaches consequence assessment, develops physical coordination." Emma successfully completed her modified maneuver from the lower platform, landing with significantly better form than her previous attempt. She immediately began planning her next progression, discussing with the other children how to safely advance to the intermediate heat platform. "They're conducting systematic risk escalation protocols," Vexthrock observed, his military training finally providing a framework for what he was witnessing. "Using incremental exposure to increasing hazard levels to develop enhanced survival capabilities." "That's a very formal way to describe learning how to play safely," Rodriguez said. "But I suppose the principle is similar." Jake had found another rock and was now demonstrating improved throwing technique based on his earlier experience. This projectile was noticeably larger than his previous attempts, and his form showed refinements that suggested he had been analyzing his performance and making systematic adjustments. "Your species," Vexthrock said, watching Jake's artillery practice with growing horror, "treats childhood as advanced military conditioning disguised as recreational activity." "That seems like a rather dramatic interpretation," Rodriguez replied. "Though I suppose if you're not familiar with human-child development, it might look a bit intense." Tyler had positioned himself to catch Jake's enhanced projectile, apparently undeterred by the increased mass and velocity. When the rock arrived, he absorbed the impact with technique that had clearly been refined through extensive practice with similar scenarios. "Captain Rodriguez," Vex Thawks said, his voice barely controlled. "I need to ask you a direct question, and I require an honest answer. Of course, are these children receiving any form of enhancement, genetic modification, chemical augmentation, technological assistance?" Rodriguez considered the question seriously. "Well, they do take vitamins, and Emma's been drinking a lot of milk lately because her mother read that calcium is important for bone development." "Vitamins," Vex Thawks repeated, "and calcium supplementation. That's about it," Rodriguez confirmed. "Unless you count the fact that Jake's been eating more protein since he started getting serious about baseball. His coach recommended it for muscle development." Vex Thawks looked at Jake, who was now casually lifting geological samples that should have required mechanical assistance, powered by nothing more than dietary protein and what appeared to be recreational enthusiasm. His scanner indicated that Jake's muscle density was approximately 40% higher than Galactic standard for comparable body mass, achieved through what humans apparently considered normal childhood nutrition. "Captain Rodriguez," he said quietly, "I think I'm beginning to understand why your species hasn't been successfully conquered." "Oh?" Rodriguez asked, her smile returning. "And why is that?" "Because," Vex Thawks said, watching Emma successfully complete another aerial maneuver while Tyler caught another one of Jake's improvised projectiles, and Marcus practiced what appeared to be advanced acrobatic techniques. "Anyone who tried to invade a world where the children train like this would have to face the adults, who survived the same childhood." Rodriguez's smile widened considerably. "That's a very astute observation, General. Would you like to continue the tour, or have you seen enough of our typical human settlement for your assessment?" Vex Thawks stared at Rodriguez for a long moment, then at the children who were now engaged in what appeared to be a collaborative effort to construct some kind of fortification using playground equipment and the various geological projectiles Jake had been collecting. According to his scanner, they were building what could only be described as an improvised defensive position with integrated ammunition storage. "Captain Rodriguez," he said slowly, "I have one final question before I complete my assessment." "Certainly." "These children," he gestured toward the playground where Emma had successfully graduated to the intermediate platform and was now teaching Tyler her improved aerial technique, "are they considered typical examples of human youth?" "Oh, absolutely," Rodriguez confirmed. "This is just a standard neighborhood playground on a regular Tuesday afternoon. Nothing special about any of these kids, really. They're all perfectly normal human children." "Perfectly normal," Vex Thawks repeated, watching as Marcus demonstrated what appeared to be an advanced climbing technique that involved moving horizontally across the overhead equipment, using only his upper appendages. "And when these perfectly normal children reach adulthood, they become perfectly normal human adults," Rodriguez finished helpfully. "Though obviously with more developed skills and greater physical capabilities than they have now." Vex Thawks' breathing apparatus made a sound that could charitably be described as a wheeze. "More developed. Well, yes. Adult humans are considerably larger, stronger, and more coordinated than children. Plus, they have fully mature cognitive development, which means better strategic thinking, improved risk assessment, and enhanced problem-solving capabilities." "Enhanced problem-solving capabilities," Vex Thawks said faintly, "applied to individuals who learned basic motor skills by repeatedly falling from dangerous heights until they developed optimal impact absorption techniques." "That's a rather clinical way to describe learning how to play," Rodriguez observed, but not entirely inaccurate. Jake had apparently decided that his current rock collection was insufficiently challenging and was now examining a piece of playground equipment that had broken loose from its moorings. According to Vex Thawks' scanner, the component weighed approximately 200 standard units and would normally require industrial machinery to relocate. "Jake, honey," Mrs. Patterson called out without looking up from her book, "if you're going to move that piece, make sure you lift with your legs, not your back. We don't want you pulling a muscle." "Okay, Mrs. Patterson," Jake called back cheerfully, adjusting his stance to demonstrate proper lifting biomechanics before hoisting the massive component with apparent ease. "Your species," Vex Thawks said, his voice barely above a whisper, "teaches optimal heavy lifting techniques to children as basic safety education." "Well, we don't want them to hurt themselves," Rodriguez said reasonably. Proper body mechanics are important for preventing injury during physical activity. Physical activity that involves moving objects that would challenge military-grade construction equipment. Jake's always been a strong kid, Rodriguez acknowledged. His father works in construction, so he's learned good technique from watching. Vexthrock activated his personal communication device with hands that were trembling slightly. General Vexthrock, to Dominion Fleet Command. Fleet Command receiving. Report status, General. Mission parameters have changed significantly. Requesting immediate extraction and full fleet withdrawal to minimum safe distance. General, you've been on surface for less than 2 hours. What's your assessment of human military capabilities? Vexthrock looked at the playground, where Emma was now teaching a group of children how to safely fall from progressively higher elevations, while Jake organized the construction of what appeared to be a siege engine, using playground equipment and basic engineering principles that he had apparently learned through casual observation of adult human activities. Command, I am formally reclassifying Earth as a Category 5 Deathworld and recommending immediate implementation of Exclusion Protocol 7. Category 5? General, that classification is reserved for planets with extreme environmental hazards and hostile apex predator species. Our intelligence indicates Earth has a benign ecosystem, with no significant threat indicators. Command, Vexthrock said, watching Tyler demonstrate what appeared to be advanced tactical movement techniques, while participating in a modified version of the pursuit game. I am observing human juveniles engaged in routine recreational activities that would qualify as advanced military training exercises on our homeworld. They are performing these activities in environmental conditions that would require life support systems for our personnel, while displaying physical capabilities that exceed our elite soldier enhancement programs. Are you saying the humans have developed some kind of super soldier program? Negative, Command. I'm saying they call it childhood. There was a long pause on the communication channel. General, please clarify. The individuals I am observing are not enhanced adults. They are standard juvenile humans, engaged in normal recreational behavior for their age group. They have achieved these capabilities through what they describe as playing outside and getting exercise. Their educational system includes systematic exposure to controlled hazard scenarios designed to develop enhanced physical resilience and problem-solving abilities. Marcus had now progressed to demonstrating what appeared to be complex three-dimensional navigation techniques, moving through the playground equipment with fluid efficiency that suggested advanced spatial awareness and kinematic planning capabilities. Furthermore, Vexthrock continued, when these juveniles sustain injury during their training activities, they analyze the failure, adjust their technique, and immediately attempt the same maneuver with improved methodology. They treat potentially fatal scenarios as learning opportunities. General, are you requesting medical evaluation? Your report suggests severe stress-induced psychological compromise. Command, I am submitting a formal recommendation that Earth be classified as off-limits to all Dominion military operations. Any species that uses what we would consider advanced military conditioning as standard childhood development is not a suitable target for conventional conquest strategies. Emma had successfully taught 3 other children her aerial technique and was now moving on to what appeared to be even more ambitious maneuvers. The group was treating each attempt as a collaborative learning experience, with participants providing technical analysis and safety recommendations to optimize performance. Additionally, Vexthrock said, his voice gaining strength as he reached his final conclusions, I am recommending that Earth be designated as a protected research zone. Any species that can achieve these capability levels through purely biological development and environmental conditioning represents a significant advancement in evolutionary adaptation that should be studied rather than conquered. General, you're recommending that we retreat from a pre-spaceflight civilization because their children play too vigorously? Vexthrock watched Jake successfully relocate the playground component to a position where it could serve as additional climbing apparatus, while Emma began instructing the other children in advanced landing techniques that incorporated elements she had learned from her recent high-impact educational experience. Command, he said firmly. I'm recommending that we retreat from this system, because if these are their children at play, I don't want to discover what their adults are like when they're serious. Understood, General. Extraction shuttle is en route. Estimated arrival in 20 minutes. Acknowledged, Command. And please log a permanent notation in the navigation database. Earth system is designated Exclusion Zone Alpha. Under no circumstances should Dominion forces approach within 5 light-years of this location. 5 light-years, General? That seems excessive. Command, Vexrock said, watching as the children began organizing themselves into what appeared to be opposing teams for some kind of competitive activity that would probably qualify as warfare simulation on most civilized worlds. Trust me on this one. He deactivated the communication device and turned to Rodriguez, who had been listening to his conversation with obvious amusement. Well, General, she said cheerfully, I hope your visit has been educational. The educational, Vexthrock agreed weakly. That's certainly one way to describe it. Before you leave, Rodriguez added, the children wanted to show you their new game. They call it Alien Tag, and apparently it involves trying to activate energy shields through strategic projectile application. Vexthrock looked toward the playground, where 15 small humans were indeed organizing themselves into what appeared to be tactical formations while discussing optimal techniques for what they cheerfully described as making the sparkly lights happen again. Captain Rodriguez, he said, backing slowly toward the extraction point. Please convey my regrets to the children, but I believe my shuttle will be arriving shortly. Of course, Rodriguez said, her smile now reaching levels that could only be described as deeply unsettling. It's been a pleasure hosting you, General. Please feel free to visit again any time. That's very kind, Vexthrock replied, but I suspect that won't be necessary. As his extraction shuttle appeared in the sky above them, the children paused in their tactical planning to wave enthusiastically at their departing visitor. Bye, lizard person, Emma called out. Thanks for showing us the cool shield thing. Come back soon, added Jake, still casually holding a piece of equipment that weighed more than most small vehicles. We'll practice our projectile techniques so we can show you better games next time, Tyler contributed helpfully. Vexthrock boarded his shuttle with movements that could charitably be described as rapid and immediately began composing his final report as they achieved orbit. Personal log General Vexrock, Galactic. Standard date 2847-3. Subject: Earth System Assessment and Exclusion Recommendation. Summary: Earth contains a species that has achieved apex predator status through environmental conditioning rather than technological enhancement. Their child-rearing practices involve systematic exposure to hazard scenarios that would qualify as military training in most civilizations. Recommend immediate implementation of permanent exclusion protocols and classification as Category 5 Deathworld. Additional notation: any civilization that considers high-gravity toxic atmosphere exposure, combined with kinetic impact training, to be appropriate recreational activity for developing juveniles should be avoided at all costs. He paused in his dictation and looked back at the planet through the shuttle's observation port, where he could still see the playground and its impossibly resilient small occupants. Personal addendum, he continued quietly. I have encountered 43 different species in my military career. I have seen civilizations that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, species with natural armor plating, and societies with weapons that could crack planets. But I have never, in all my years of service, encountered anything more terrifying than human children at play. End log. As the shuttle departed Earth's orbital space, General Vexrock filed his final report with Fleet Command, recommending that the coordinates for the Sol system be permanently deleted from all navigation databases, and that any references to humans be reclassified under mythical species presumed extinct. It seemed safer that way.